right, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's great to see everyone here today. We have a really interesting panel. We've got a nice cross-section of films that I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation, hearing a little bit more about the films, the filmmakers, the process, the journey, and we'll leave lots of room for some Q&A from all of you as well. This is our 13th annual Chagrin Documentary Film Fest. I'm Trish Sylvia. I'm the chair of the Documentary Film Fest board, and just really passionate and excited about this community and what's going on with our film fest. We have, it's that time of year where our little town just transforms into this vibrant, energetic kind of entity or organism. And, we encounter people from all different walks of life, all different interests, all different places, and we have a chance to have conversations about things that we might not normally get to talk about. And I love that, and these panels are really conducive to that as well. So certainly just want to thank all of you for your involvement, for your support, for all the ways that you engage with the Film Fest. And we're excited about what's going on, excited about the Capital campaign and the idea of year-round programming and ways that we can really even go deeper into what it means to be not just an annual film festival, but an organization that supports filmmakers, uplifts the work that's being done, and really, in our own way, changes the world, kind of one film at a time, right? So I'm joined today by three of our filmmakers. We may have a fourth that pops in as well. And I wanted to just invite you to kind of self-introduce yourself, your film, and I'm interested as well in kind of what brings you here specifically to this film fest as you were thinking about, kind of how your journey was going to go with your film. And we do have a microphone there if you want to.
Hi everyone, my name is Diane Cheklich. I am a co-director of a short documentary called Pheasants of Detroit, and I traveled here from Detroit earlier this week. Our film screened on Wednesday, and it'll also be screening tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening. Very excited to be here and answer to your question, Trish. My co-director, Diane Weiss, who couldn't be here, and I heard a lot of good things about this film festival, and she lives in Philadelphia, I'm in Detroit, and it was geographically kind of convenient, and very excited to be here. I can understand why the festival gets such nice accolades. Thanks for being here today.
My name is Ivan. I'm the producer of the film Cats of Malta. It is about the cats in Malta, so self-explanatory there. We actually heard that this festival, I think it's on the Movie Maker list of top 50 festivals worth their entry fee. So we were happy to submit and then thrilled that we actually got accepted. So we ended up coming here, like we live in Croatia today, so we came from Croatia, and we're actually doing a bit of a cat tour this month because we're playing in New York in a couple of weeks, and we went to a cat convention in LA last week, so yeah, just happy to be here.
Brandon Jackson, co-director, co-producer of Oyate, which screened on Wednesday and I believe is streaming. Both me and my co-director are from Ohio, and so we are very familiar with the Chagrin Documentary Film Festival and have attended before and shown many years ago, executive produced a film that was here, so I like to keep coming back.
Well, we're glad that you're all here. It's interesting when we think about the legacy of this particular film fest and David Ponce, it's very much about showcasing what the human spirit's capable of. And I was thinking about that as we were, and also the concept of kind of bringing the world home, Like those two ideals are really meaningful to this particular film fest. And as I was thinking about this discussion, I was curious, when you think about those things in the context of your film that's here and certainly your body of work that you're doing, how does that affect or resonate with you?
I guess I'll start since I have the microphone. Oyate is about indigenous activists in North and South Dakota, and as well as around the country. And I don't think there's anything more in line with the festival's mission. It's a marginalized community that never, very rarely gets their story told. And we really focused on having them tell the story, and have an indigenous producer and things like that. So the idea was to get indigenous stories front and center. I think there's a big movement in the film industry to get that to happen. We're definitely not the only film out there right now trying to push that forward, but that was the idea behind the film, is to get those stories to places where people aren't usually exposed to things like that.
You did, before we move, I mean, you did an amazing job with that. I was, as I was viewing it, you know, you like to think that as we evolve, as we understand things, you know, we change in that process, but there's still so much. You talked in the film, or it was discussed in the film, about, you know, the stories that were told, the way that we were taught history. And that was really impactful to me, because I thought about, you know, I'm older than you, but I mean, it really was the big, you know, it's the big happy table that everybody sat at and enjoyed a meal together, and it was taught to us that way. You know, from the earliest age that I can remember in school, when we got to November, you know, who gets to be a pilgrim and who's going to be not the pilgrim. And because it wouldn't be right to say what we were, you know, and we made the hats and the outfits, and you know, but it was just such a misrepresentation that perpetuated over and over and over. I'm interested in just hearing you talk more about that idea related to your film, and then we'll definitely stay here. But yeah.
Sure. Well, I think you've nailed it on the head there. It's as far as the United States is concerned, indigenous history doesn't exist, and that's very intentional and important for our origin story as a country. And obviously, that's not the case, and the film focuses on that history extended long before Columbus showed up on 3 cute little ships, as one of our subjects says. And yeah, I mean, so it was important for us to work with the community on it. I think a lot of times, especially in films like this, they talk about how you need to be have air between you and your subjects, and we just did not agree with that. We were the lucky filmmakers who got the funding and had the cameras, but the story was told from the community. It was produced with the community, with organizations who are in the community every day, and so that is how we made sure that not only was the film diverse, but representational as well, that history and those stories were not in any way through our own lens. So.
Very good, thank you. I'm kind of coming back to the human spirit and the bringing the world home. Yes.
Yep. Well, the film, as I said, it's about the cats, but there's actually 100,000 cats, you know, stray cats in Malta, on an island that's about 122 square miles. And, you know, each village, it has 2 or 3 feeders that look after these cats before work, after work. They feed the cats, they, you know, buy the food from their own pocket, and they take them to the vet, they take them to neutering where they, you know, need to be neutered or looked after. So it's, you know, these cats actually bring the community together. and you're almost, it's like this one great community of cat lovers in Malta, and because the island is so small, only like I think it's 400,000 people, everyone kind of knows everybody there, and they know it through these cats that are bringing them all together.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I'm when we think about the Pheasants of Detroit, and I wanted to talk to you both in terms of like the community identification, through that. But I want to give you a chance to kind of answer first, and then we'll move into that.
Right. Yeah. I think similarly, Pheasants of Detroit is about the people in the neighborhoods of Detroit and that spirit and their connection and inspiration by these non-human neighbors. And it's a story that most people aren't aware of about Detroit, right? When you think of Detroit, Michigan, you think of cars or music, but we have these wild game birds running around in the streets, and people consider them as their neighbors or their muse. And so it's a celebration, really, of the human and animal connection. And it's kind of pervasive through the community, and this film gave us a chance to pull those stories together and tell it as a collective, and I think it has a lot of impact with that approach.
It certainly does. On a little bit different note, just recognizing the interaction, when you have a creature in your film that's not a human, some of the unique challenges. And I'd be curious to hear you talk about, is it easy to film a pheasant? Tell us some stories.
Okay. Well, it is not easy to film a pheasant. They are wild animals. They're not domestic, and they're very skittish, especially in an urban center where there's a lot of commotion around them, right? They're ground-based birds, and so they tend to run if they even detect something that makes them nervous. So they're not easy. A lot of the close-ups that we got in the film were from motion-activated trail cameras, and also cameras with very long lenses where the subject is far away, but we still get a nice frame out of it. And some of them are farther because we wanted to capture the environment where they are. So you see them in an open area with a large building behind it, so you have to get a sense that they are pheasants of Detroit. And so to see the environment where they exist was important to us in telling the story.
I guess we probably wouldn't want to put the cats and the pheasants together, but for purposes of the conversation, I think of I think most expressions have a reason behind, and I think of the expression that it's like herding cats, and similarly to you.
Well, we all know cats do whatever they want, so
Right.
there's no directing them. And so it was a challenge. Similarly, like you use telescopic lenses, we'll film in 4K, but then in the edit we'll punch into 1820 to actually get a closer shot where you can't quite get close enough without startling the cat. Sometimes I'll use a gimbal upside down to get the camera nice and low to get on their level, and it was particularly challenging considering I'm also allergic to cats. So I remember shooting in a sanctuary, and we're just surrounded by 200 cats, and they climb all over me. And it lasted about an hour before I have to step out because I'm starting to sneeze and my eyes are getting watery. So I had to take a bit of a break before we go in and film some more footage.
That's so funny. I was watching your film, and it did cross my mind. I said, boy, this would be difficult if you had an allergy.
I love them. It's great cruelty of my life.
Nice. Brandon, I'm interested in, kind of thinking a little bit more around, and really for all of you, because there is an element of trust that a filmmaker needs to have, whether you're working with humans or animals or, wherever the planet. I mean, there's an element of trust and respect that I believe needs to exist, or relationship. And I was really interested in how you cultivated that. What's the story behind that? You know, how were you able to go into the Indigenous community, gain their trust and their willingness to participate with you to the degree that they did?
I mean, it's one of those things that it takes years. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to the Standing Rock protests in 2016 and 2017. That's where I met our Indigenous producer, Jen, and we started building a relationship there. She opened a considerable amount of doors, and having her name, you know, attached, got people to sit down with us. But more than that, also just being showing solidarity before even filming and being at the what is colloquially called camp. If you say, "Oh, you know, I was at camp," then everyone knows what you mean, and they trust you a little bit more because they know that you've already stood with them. I mean, that's the funny thing. It's like I was saying, filmmakers don't necessarily have to have a separation from their subjects. You know, we were in the communities, and I think, you know, being friends and going to dinner or with the hip hop artist, we did a traditional sweat lodge ceremony with him and his family, which built a lot of trust with us. Was an incredible cultural experience. I think respect and cultural observation has to be absolute if you're not from that community. And that's what we went in every single day. If someone didn't want to shoot with us and, you know, the shoot was costing $5,000 a day, it's like, well, then we lost $5,000. But that's okay because we're respecting the time of the people. As far as like Phyllis and some of the older subjects, they're elders. You don't interrupt an elder when they're talking. So we have a 6-hour interview with Phyllis that's mostly unusable, but you know, it's like that's the respect you have to show in order to get the stuff that you need for your film. And so that's kind of what we did. It was, when we first got there, Jen said, "You're on our land, you're on our time." And, you know, it's like we'll come to you. And so it was a lot of that. It was a lot of waiting around, but it was all worth it. And I mean, I still talk to the subjects every couple weeks, if not more than that. And so yeah, it was a pretty incredible experience.
Thank you. I want to earmark topics like timeline, like what's actually involved from the moment that you have this. Oh, this is my topic. This is my subject. This is what I'm going to make a film about. You know, and to delivering it, and then also funding. That's a big, you know, a big thing when I'm talking to filmmakers that I hear a lot about. Like, how do you figure that aspect out? But this idea of trust and respect, I'd be interested in hearing you guys talk about it in the communities that you were filming, and so forth as well.
For us, most of the subjects were pretty open, you know, because we're talking to them about their favorite topic, and you know, a lot of these feeders or volunteers or sanctuaries, they spent years and years looking after the cats, and they're happy to share their story because it's also about, you know, raising more awareness in Malta for the stray cats. So they're excited that we're actually making a film about it. We only really had issue with one of the feeders, and we actually interviewed her accidentally. Like, we were interviewing a little boy named Isaac, and we were filming in a park, and the feeder came along. Her name was Nikki, and you know, pretty much on the spot, we had a release form and we'd done an interview with her. But then afterwards, she thought Isaac was trespassing in her area, so she wasn't happy about that. And I don't think she's seen the film to that day. To this day, we had a couple of screenings in Malta in the cinema, like test screenings. And we tried to call her, invite her. We even had gift bags, like vouchers to do free neutering, but she never got back to us. So we still don't know how she feels about the film to this day. But everyone else was easy to work with.
I think I would echo what you have said so far about building the trust and relationship. Our film is 15 minutes long, and it took us 5 years to make. And we try not to think about that part too much. But both I and Diane Weiss, the co-director, are Detroit residents, and everyone, all the narrators in the film are neighbors in Detroit, are Detroit residents as well. And many of them we knew, and so that trust was there. You don't really see, in our film, you don't really see the speakers that much because it's about the pheasants of Detroit, but the people who have the relationships with the pheasants are the ones speaking, and it's not a scripted narration, it's just conversations that we recorded. And it sounds natural, those are part of comfortable conversations that people are having, and that's because the trust was there. So it is an important thing to cultivate that and to respect who you're talking to, and if anything feels uncomfortable for them, then you have to respect that and adjust accordingly. But it's really critical, especially in Detroit. People respect you more when you're from Detroit because there's a bond there within the city, and so it was helpful that we lived there too. And some people we had known ahead of time and said, hey, we want to tell this story about pheasants, and are you willing to talk to us about it? And we were able to get that entry because of that existing relationship.
Do you remember the moment when you knew you wanted to tell the story?
I actually knew a little bit ahead of that because I've lived in Detroit for 10 years now. I was born there. But I just thought it was fascinating that there are these funky birds just walking, and they're beautiful too. If you've ever seen, they're ring-necked pheasants. So they have this striking dark head and a white ring around their neck, and they're gorgeous birds. And I was just fascinated to see them walking around the street, and it's like, well, what's going on here? And so the more I saw them and heard people's stories, there have been artists and businesses that were inspired by these birds, and I thought, well, let's figure this out. And a lot of that 5 years was in getting pheasant footage because, like I said, they're not very willing subjects. And as word got out in the community that we were doing this film, people would start texting us, oh, I saw a pheasant at so-and-so intersection. And, oh, there are babies over here, because we had this list. Let's get some babies and let's get one flying. And so a lot of people kind of rallied and said, oh, have you seen this mural? And what about this? And so it was kind of a crowdsourced project in that way. And it made it that much more fun to get a lot of people in the community just chipping in with suggestions and scouting and things like that.
I was touched by all the interpretations of the pheasant that you depicted in the film. Certainly the creature itself and the beauty, I would never know how difficult it was to capture that, because it didn't look hard from your film. So kudos to you. But
yes.
The interpretation of the pheasant and the claiming of that as a piece of sort of cultural identity for your community, I thought that was just really kind of subtly and beautifully captured in the film. And it left me wanting to hear more about that, more about the ways that this community identifies in that common language, but with their own very specific kind of interpretation. And I think that may be true for all of these films, because there is such a potent sort of cultural identity that matters in different ways for each film. But I'd be interested in if that was something that you bumped into over and over, and how you were able to kind of just show that so well in each film.
Well, just real quickly, and then I'll let the others speak. But our film was put together very organically. There wasn't anyone who said, "Oh, let's have this vision of a pheasant subculture in Detroit." That it didn't happen like that. But we would stumble across, oh, here's this brewery that's got a giant pheasant on the wall, and here's another one that's named after pheasants, and here's this mural and that mural. And there's a section in the film that focuses on the artwork that's come up, and a lot of it's public art, large pieces around the city. And you kind of step back and admire how large this body of work is from all these diverse different artists who do have their own interpretations of this same kind of bird. And so I'm kind of proud that we were able to curate all of that, I guess, because it's so organic and people are just doing their thing, and that's a fine in and of itself. It's almost better, really, like, oh, we're not engineering this thing. It just happened. And we are just telling the story of that in a curated way.
Yeah, very similar. Cats are, they're really linked to Malta, because there's so many, like almost any corner you turn, you'll see a stray cat, crossing the road, and there's all like cats memorabilia there, and it's, part of that culture. There's actually something called Cat Park. There's a giant cat sculpture in that park. There's, even folklore about the cats, like there's one tale where how the cat is facing, what direction the cat is facing when it's licking itself. That's the way that the wind's going to be blowing the next day. It's really, cats are just kind of linked to Malta, a part of the identity.
Love that.
I guess we took as you put it, a very engineered approach, I guess. We wanted to ingrain the storytelling with as much indigenous culture as possible, since again, most of America isn't exposed to that as much. One thing is just the way we tell the narrative. It's not a linear or even truly Western concept for narrative storytelling. It is Lakota, and it explains in the beginning of the film that they see the world as a circle. And they have this concept of 7 generations, what I do affects 7 generations from now, and what people 7 generations before me did affects me. So it's this cyclical nature, and we ingrain that in the film, that it's, we kind of take 3 tracks, as it were, which is current, the Standing Rock protests, and history, and we cycle through. And as the film goes on, you see more and more different generations. So we start off with an elder, and then Chase is about 45, I want to say. Then we have Stuart, who's, I want to say 30, or late 20s, and then Takata, who's 16, and in the film she's 16, and it's all about this perpetuation of generation. And then we also really worked closely with them musically, so that Chase even said before he signed on, he was like, if I see one more movie with an Indian with a solo flute in the background, I'm just gonna throw up. And we were like, okay, so we're not gonna do that. And we got one of the best indigenous composers in the world to do the music, and all the themes are either traditional Lakota themes, or for Deb Holland, she's Pueblo, so her theme is an old Pueblo lullaby, and all of that is ingrained in the film that way.
Can we talk a little bit about process and how long it took and what a day in the life is like for you, and just this whole if you kind of took scope of project, now you're on this side of it, sort of looking back. Would you talk, all 3 of you, a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it sounds like we all spent many years on our films here. I think ours took 4, stretched into the pandemic, which had its own issues. But I mean, a lot of it was about gaining trust, as we talked about, for us. But it was also, every step of the way, learning more and figuring out what the story is, because especially for if you want to talk about indigenous rights, there's 400 years of of negligence on that. So it's like, how do you craft a story and how do you ground that in character? And so I think we did 10 shoots, but in between it was reading, calling, research. I mean, there's a lot of archival in the film. We collected about 900 hours of archival. We had to watch it, break it down, figure out what worked, what didn't. What ended up being about less than 15 minutes in the film. So.
What was the size of your team?
It was way smaller than it should have been, but that's just documentaries. It was myself and my co-director. He did the cinematography and edit. And then on the reservation, we did about a 4-person crew, sometimes 5. And then, yeah, I mean, the post team was small. We did use a reputable sound house for that. But I mean, the amount of people who touched the film is hundreds of people. But as far as like everyday crew, it was really just 2 of us making this movie. So.
Yeah, for us it took about 2 years to complete. We started filming back in 2020, just as the pandemic was hitting, and it's actually a happy accident for us because we never set out to make this film. We had a new camera, and there was these restrictions in Malta where it was limited amount of people you could have in a group. So, we're filmmakers, want to make films, but we couldn't work with any crew. So to test the camera, we actually just started taking some shots of cats. So, and at the same time that cat sculpture in the park, it was being repainted, and Sarah, the director, she approached the artist, Matthew Pandolfino, if she can actually interview him and can we film him while he repaints this. So that was our first interview, and then we started thinking, we actually might have something here. So we started seeking out more, sanctuaries, feeders, and just interesting stories about the cats on the island, and it just, grew and grew. And maybe about 3 or 4 months to film, all the interviews of the film. But then, we went back in 2021 to just do pickups. As you like editing something, you realize you need a shot of this, so you go back and do some more. It was probably like 1 year all up in post-production, and we didn't actually have any funds. Like, we own our own equipment, and the crew was pretty much Sarah and I for most of it. Sometimes we'd have a second camera operator when we had something bigger like a sanctuary and there's like 200 cats running around. But yeah, we raised some money on Kickstarter to actually fund the post-production, did the color grade and sound design, and at the beginning of 2022 it was finally complete. So yeah.
We also had a small crew. It was me and Diane during all of production. We did hire a composer for the music, and powered through it on, it was a no-budget movie. We did apply for some grant money, but that didn't come through, and we're like, we're doing this anyway, file it under labor of love. And our process was, we really did want to celebrate, and I like to use that word because it's a fun celebration of a human and nature connection. And so the focus at first was, are we even going to be able to get any decent footage of these birds? I don't want to waste anyone's time talking about it unless we could get some decent footage. So we really focused on that in the early part of our process. Then the pandemic hit, and we couldn't really go to people's houses, so we went out in the field some more and got some more footage, but did conduct interviews with folks along the way. And some of the footage that we got was in the form of field trips. I also happen to be on the board of Detroit Audubon, which is an environmental and bird conservation organization. And we conducted I conducted some pheasant tours because I'm such a big fan of the birds. I'm not an expert in them by any means, but I've studied them and know enough to be dangerous. So we would conduct some tours, and Diane would come along with the camera. And so we captured some tours that I gave, and also we had connections to the Department of Natural Resources that operates out of Detroit. And there are a few pheasants right along the Detroit riverfront, like tucked in right near downtown. And So the DNR conducted some tours, and so we recorded some of that as well. And the DNR is much more expert than I am. But we ended up deciding that a loose concept of a tour or a field trip could be the background for this film, so that viewers could kind of follow along and see what the people on the field trip could see. And I think that ended up working kind of well. It's as close to that actual experience as we could bring our audience. So a lot of fun, took a while, and we had to get creative, the mother of invention and all that.
Well, it definitely comes through in the films, for sure. I'm interested in kind of where each of you are in your journey as a filmmaker. Like, kind of, how would you describe, is this your first film? Is it, and what maybe do you hope for as it relates to, when you think about the trajectory of your film, where do you see that or hope it goes?
I've been making films for a little over 20 years, actually. I started out making a short and trial by fire type of a thing, and have also done production management and worked on other people's film crews. And so I've had some experience with other people's work that way as well. More recently, I'm more focused on doing my own work and telling stories that are important. Most of my more recent work has to do with nature and the environment, and just raising awareness and telling these stories in an entertaining way, where you have a chance to reach an audience that might not otherwise choose to go and learn some of these facts that come out. And so that's kind of the space where I am at the moment, and got a couple other projects that are queued up behind this that really don't fall into that. So I'm just kind of following what where my heart is taking me. Humor tends to find its way into a lot of my work, and so regardless of my next project is going to be an experimental piece, but the humor, I think, is a constant thread for my work.
Been making films since 2006, but we usually do narrative dramas, like not scripted. We do improvised films, like we're inspired by mumblecore, like Joe Swanberg, that type of thing. So this is actually our first documentary, so it was a learning curve for us, a very different process, and just so much footage to sort through. So that's why it took so long in post-production. In terms of Cats of Malta, it will be broadcast on PBS next year for actually International Cat Day, so we timed that perfectly. And we're just hoping to do a few more festivals before then. We're talking to a couple of distributors, and kind of considering our offer at the moment. But pretty much we actually make our living these days as filmmakers, but it took a long time to get there, because we have quite a few features on the markets. So and the fact we live in Croatia, where it's actually so cheap to live, like we couldn't live in America and be full-time filmmakers, or Australia, but we can live in a country like Croatia where our rent's like $500 a month, and that's so it's quite easy to make it over there. But our first documentary, so fingers crossed it continues to have success.
Sounds like housing expenses might be the next topic for you.
Sure.
Because we have some issues with that here. That's terrific. And I definitely want to hear. I just would really be interested to know if any other film fest hosted a cat parade, though. I mean. No,
you're the only one. So we
Well,
are
good.
part of the New York Cat
Good.
Festival in a couple of weeks, so let's see what happens
A festival I could understand, but a parade, I mean, that's pretty special.
there. It is special.
We're hoping we have some cats show up, and we hope that they don't run away, because ours aren't quite used to
Fingers crossed.
congregating the way the ones in the film are. So.
I mean, right now we are looking for distribution. I think that, I mean, obviously we'd love a broadcast of some kind, but education, I think, is where the film will live. We're hoping to get into schools, colleges, community centers, really anywhere that kind of wants to learn more. And we said early on with someone in the community, they were like, we're really tired of having to give pretext to our stories all the time. You know, we can't ever say, well, this is the issue that we're talking about. We have to say, well, you know, when Columbus showed up, this, and then, you know, in the 1800s, this, and then in the 1900s, this, and we couldn't vote till, you know, this time. And so we're hoping that this kind of acts as a 101 that can kind of push everyone a little forward so that more Indigenous stories don't have to spend 20 minutes of their actual story telling a story that everyone should sort of know. As you said, that we have kind of failed as a society telling in history class.
Your topic is more politicized, arguably, than the other films that are here in terms of, yes, yes. And I imagine that has some unique challenges when you're thinking about distribution and, like you said, you know, just telling the story in a particular way. Is there any more you might say about that? I know we have a fairly divisive world that we live in when we think politically, whether it's here in the United States or other places as well. But I thought about that a lot when I was thinking about the courage to tell the story and the story itself as it related to your film.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, first of all, we really tried to be neutral in our film making. I mean, we're critical of both parties, and in the United States, and we also it's funny because everyone says we took a very left-leaning stance, but that was just like, well, this is the historical stance. So whether unfortunately, if you don't agree with it, it's history, you know. And we actually spoke to Higher Ground Productions, which is Obama ran, and because we're critical of Obama's role in Standing Rock, they were like, no, we can't touch this. But it is, at the end of the day, we, especially as documentarians, we show life, we show truth, we show history, we show facts, and that's what we set out to do. And I think we can kind of all get behind that. And yeah, I mean, one of our characters is Indigenous, a Republican, which many people think there aren't Indigenous Republicans. There's plenty of them. And she says, like, I believe in small government. Why? Because big government has impeded on my rights as an Indigenous American. She's like, I believe in states and smaller communities' sovereignty. Again, as an Indigenous American, that falls in line with our way of thinking. She's like, what we want is representation of our ideas, and it doesn't matter who's putting them out. You know, in Nixon, who we all think is just like, you know, the worst, he was really, really engaged in the Indigenous communities. And then again, if you watch the film, it's like Obama, I mean, personally, I'm, you know, a Democrat, but it's like Obama could have done more during the Standing Rock protests. He could have intervened. There was a lot more that could have been done. And then in the past administration, there were threats to Indigenous rights, Indigenous sovereignty, and every Indigenous person we talked to said this isn't a political thing. This is our rights being, you know, challenged. So yeah, that was our idea, to kind of move past that divisiveness and just say, well, we're all in this together, and we're all in that. We're all in the soup, you know. It really doesn't matter what side you're coming from, because we all have to address this issue.
I think that word evidence, you know, when it becomes controversial, like, what does the evidence tell us where does that take us. So we want to make some space here for the audience. Are you guys up to some Q&A from our audience? I don't know if we have a microphone that we could pass, but you're welcome to come up here. If you want to get up, come up, ask a question, we'd be happy to have you. What questions do we have for our panelists? Yes.
I mean, that's what we talk about with the extractive industries. They're powerful, you know. They have more political weight than any company should, and they just didn't turn off the pipeline. And it's like when we talk about laws are useless if there's no accountability. There's no accountability measure that said you have to shut off this pipeline. That is an excellent question. And I think that's what we all need to think about, is who has the muscle. And especially with the pipeline, there was so much in the film there's so much we couldn't even put in the film because it would make the film 5 hours long. And I mean, there was, and I have documents, interviews with the cops who admit to it. I have all the evidence you could ever want that says that the police, the local police, the United States National Reserve, a illegal private military organization, and the corporation were all coordinating, organizing, and working directly with each other to a point where a military company, which was not licensed to operate in the state of North Dakota, it's a company we, up until this point, only sent to Afghanistan and Iraq. They were this is a military company. Imagine that we're actively using our own military on our own citizens. Was illegally operating in the state, and they were handing out weapons and surveillance technology to the cops so that they could do it. They brought missiles. They brought automatic. I mean, big, like those big guns, and they brought surveillance drones that used like satellite, like the really high-tech stuff you think the CIA uses on terrorists 8,000 miles away. They were using on citizens, which is illegal, I mean, as we know. So yeah, to not get too long-winded here, that is the question. Why can that happen, but we can't shut down a pipeline if the United States government says this is against the law?
Mary Ann? So just to repeat, because we do have some viewers, one thing that surprised you most in making your film?
I hand it off. I've been talking long.
I'll hand it off because I can't think of an answer.
Oh, okay. The thing that surprised me was how much this, I don't know, I'll call it a subculture for lack of a better word, in a very positive way. People who have a real connection with ringneck pheasants in the city of Detroit. And we didn't know how pervasive this would be when we started making the movie, but people who have a name for the bird that comes around to their yard, or someone who named their business after it, or so many artists who painted a tribute to these birds all around the city of Detroit. It's really something that's far-reaching in the city, and that was a very pleasant, surprising result for us that we really didn't anticipate in the beginning. But I'm very happy that it turned out that way, and the people in the city of Detroit who have seen it, it's resonating with them, and I hope it raises that awareness and that more people can celebrate what we have in Detroit.
Is there a pheasant festival in Detroit?
Not yet.
Mance is a little different. Maybe not during the making of the film, but the fact that it's actually become our favorite film, and we never even set out to make this. Like, we have other films, that we spent, a year or two developing, and you're applying for grants, doing crowdfunding for it to get it off the ground. And there's there's going to be a fantastic film, but then this film, that just kind of happens accidentally, has become our favorite, and we've met so many beautiful people from the making of it, and we're still friends with them to this day. And Sarah still gets we still get stories. Oh, there's a cat in Malta. Come tell my story. But we finished shooting over a year ago now. We can't shoot anymore. So yeah.
The question was, what surprised you?
What surprised me the most? I mean, I guess just how much story has been untold. I mean, it's like I considered myself very educated going in, and they were like, yeah, you know 2% of it. And so, I mean, as I think I exhausted myself saying before, it was about learning. And every time we, unpeeled a layer of the onion, there was more there. And especially the Standing Rock protest issues, it was oh, that sounds really terrible. Oh, that sounds really terrible. Oh, that sounds really terrible. So yeah, I think that, I guess, was the most surprising.
Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. We're still not sure how the cats actually got there. We asked a few people that question, but no one had a real definite answer. But assumed they just arrived on the ships, because Malta is a nation that's been pretty much conquered by every single every single power on earth. They've had so many different rulers. But the fact is, cats breed really quickly, and you have these feeders with these colonies. They try to neuter their cats and keep the colony under control, but then someone goes, they dump a cat, and if the cat hasn't been neutered, then it gets in the colony, and suddenly there's 20 other brand new cats. So over many years, it just keeps growing, and there's education programs in Malta about the need to neuter, but not everyone takes heed of that, and maybe some of the kind of the older generation have the mentality of the animals are just there to be used, catch the rats on the farm or something like that, and once they've finished their usefulness, then they'll just go dump them on the street. So it's just a problem that was perpetuated over the years.
Other questions? All right. Are there any final thoughts or ideas or questions that you all want to ask?
No, just we're super grateful to be part of this festival. Thank you for having us here, and come to the screening. And if you have a cat, bring it along tomorrow in the park.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and thank you, Trish, for inviting us. And I'm thrilled to be part of the festival.
Thank you as well. I always love coming here. It's just an awesome place, awesome time. Get to see very interesting films that you wouldn't even cross, you know, I didn't even know that there were cats in Malta, and that's pretty wild. And I've been to, yeah, exactly. And I didn't know there were pheasants in Detroit either. It's like you said. So it's like that's what documentaries are all about: is showing interesting things that you just wouldn't be on your radar otherwise. So thank you.
Well, thank you to all of you. So Cats of Malta is screening tomorrow, 1 p.m. Riverside Park. Bring your cat. And Pheasants of Detroit at the intermediate school at 10:30 on Saturday as well. And then Brandon, you screened on Wednesday, right? Yeah, congratulations for that. And I think we'll be able to stream all of the films as well. So don't miss the opportunity. These are really, really great. And this Film Fest is all about the filmmakers, so thank you. Big round of applause for our filmmakers. We love the way that you're bringing voice and color and stories, you know, that need to be told. So thank you so much for what you do, and thanks all of you for being here. All right, enjoy the fest.
It sounds really good. I'm going to check